Chapter 7. What about the bird in the cage? Part 2. I'm glad that I don't have to ask people to follow me when I browse books because they are printed in letterpress, but I guess it's still technically impossible for me to do photo books. Ignoring Keech's spirit threads, Sena examined the basic medicinal herbs that they would need, and then moved on to the room with the specimens. One of Sena's goals was to become a hunter-adventurer, and even if it was true in stories that the first request of an adventurer was to collect medicinal herbs, medicine was something Sena could not do without. To save money and to make a profit from the sale of what he collected, he wanted to know how to collect usable medicinal herbs. Of course, they were also used as food. It was interesting to see that the level of illustrations varied from book to book. I was surprised that some of the illustrations were of a very high level, although some of them were surprisingly poor. I felt that they were trying to convey the characteristics. I've heard that a hand-drawn portrait on a handbill is surprisingly more likely to be found than a photo portrait. Besides, there were some interesting drawings, so I would like to have them if they are available. It's more like an art book than an illustrated book, isn't it? I think Kuriko would like it. I'll never get tired of this place because it's a library with a lot of different things to offer. But as expected, there were only a few magic-related books, and even with Barigaru-san's ID, we were not allowed to enter the rare book room, which was a pity, but we did get a surprising harvest from an unexpected book. It was a rather light book titled Interesting Magic, 100 Mysteries. That was an interesting book. It was an entertaining book of little anecdotes and musings, but the ideas were so bizarre, it was like watching your mother. It was just a phase of my imagination, but someone else was thinking about the same thing as the spirit thread storage. In that book, there was a section on useful magical tools like an infinite storage unit that utilized a transfer gate. So there are no limits to what we can imagine. But the magic book for beginners was an interesting thing for the same amusement, no? Nayuta's tone was mischievous, and her smile was full of mirth. But what if it was entertainment? I almost shouted, "What the hell is this?" The book was for beginners, but it was a proper instructional book. It contained a collection of examples of spells and diagrams for activating the magic, along with some difficult explanations. For example, for the magic to create a single wind, there were about 10 examples of spells, all of which could create wind, and some of which could not create wind. Blow, wind, blow. The simplicity started at that level. In the name of Kanakat na Athleona Galagarestu Alberica Metalmus, the creator god who created the heavens and the earth, I invoke you to blow, to breeze, and to be stormy. Let the blade of emptiness be born in response to my wish. Grant my wish. Please. The long version was like that, but it ended with a plea, which was incomprehensible. Other than that, there were many other unintelligible coined words, such as asking for help from ancestral spirits or giving thanks to one's parents. There was even a poem about the wind, but I stopped reading after the first few words. It's not a magic spell anymore. The illustration explains that there are various poses that resemble wind, and to begin with, flapping your hands and fanning yourself, is that magic? The others were weird dances. There are also various poses to represent wind, such as blowing air through pursed lips, and an unintelligible avant-garde dance with a costume full of streamers. It's more like a prayer than magic, isn't it? If I was asked to do such a thing without knowing anything about it, I would give up on magic at once. If it were a small child, but at my age, the hurdle is too high. If there was a magic school where high school-age students were taking such lessons, they would immediately report their withdrawal from the school. Haha. I guess it's just how difficult it is for ordinary people to imagine and activate magic. Even flapping your hands might be surprisingly effective if you have a clear image of what you're doing, right? Is this all? Sena lightly fanned his left hand, and suddenly a gust of wind blew through the corridor. Yeah. The gust of wind caught the hem of the long skirts of the women walking in front, exposing their calves. They shyly held their hems down and looked at Sena, but this place was an open hallway, and Sena quickly averted his face abruptly. Things calmed down. It's too bad it wasn't a mini. Whoever wrote the book, I am so sorry for making fun of you. After that, it was a secret that he suddenly wondered if it was possible to make a vacuum cutter. I was surprised. This place is certainly worth the price of a proper admission. No wonder there are so many hunter adventurers here. Actual plant specimens could only be viewed in the reading room in the presence of a staff member, and special permission was required for rare plant specimens, but their collection of hundreds of thousands of specimens, including those from other continents, was the largest in the world. What was surprising was that the general class specimen material was sold in sets. Moreover, there are 100 species in a set, and that alone contains almost all the main species used in everyday life, and even specimens of semi-rare species. The librarian explained that these specimens were standard materials that local hunter-adventurers and potion guilds would always have on hand, and if they were of a higher rank than this, they would be in the realm of very advanced specialties. They were powerful medicines and poisons, and some were addictive narcotics, requiring expertise in gathering them and a fourth or higher grade qualification from the Potions and Medicine Guild to use them for recipes and other purposes. It is also amazing that there are greenhouses where various medicinal herbs are cultivated. There are about 800 varieties, but it is valuable to be able to actually see the living organisms of these herbs, which are used with high frequency and are apparently quite difficult to find if you actually want to try to collect them. It would be nice to see a display of specimens of demons, collections of weapons and armor, traps, clothing, and so on. Especially the display of equipment of famous hunter-adventurers and mages from the past, when magic boxes were scarce, is a good reference. It was an important opportunity to see the prioritization of equipment needs, which was often neglected when there were spirit thread storage and high-level magic boxes. Not only new hunters who did not have a magic box, but also high-level hunters could benefit from this knowledge. For Sena, in particular, it was a great opportunity to compare his knowledge. It's a little late, but let's eat and go to town. We will be visiting here many times in the future, and we need to check something quickly, don't we? Sena went to the cafeteria, which was identified on the information board. The dining hall was separated for the general public and the privileged. The library also had a special reading room where a librarian would bring the books needed, and Sena's permit allowed him to use that room, but as expected, he could not borrow any of the treasured books, so he entered as a general visitor. Of course, he could use the dining room of the privileged class, but the meal was a full-course meal and he had to change his clothes. Apparently, there were also rental clothes, but he did not want to have such a meal. To their delight, the cafeteria was equipped with a large magic box, so it was open all day. Hot food was always served with no waiting time. Hey, long time no see. You remember me, don't you? I'll have the third course. Kicha intervened just as Sena was about to pay for his meal at the ticket counter. He was obviously a friend of Sena's, and he was about to force Sena to pay for his meal. And what he ordered was the most expensive set meal in the restaurant. Excuse me, who are you? Sena paid the exact amount for himself, received his meal ticket, and quickly went to the counter. Cancel that one. Make a tea, please. With a scowl, he changed to the cheapest menu item and came after Sena. No, you were injured and feeling dizzy at the time. It can't be helped. I'm Kicha. Baragaru and I were the main party members who took down that large chimera. Oh, why don't we go to the guest room? I may look like this, but I'm a man of many faces. Oh, I remember now. Baragaru told me a lot of things about you. While Kicha was frightened, Sena moved to a spot near the window with a nice view. No, that's a misunderstanding. His expression twisted for a moment, but he quickly followed with a beaming face. Moreover, the moment he sat down, he quickly and casually tried to snatch one of the sandwiches off Sena's tray, but Sena moved his tray and easily ducked. I know a lot about you. A lot of things, you know. Kicha whispered thoughtfully as he sat up and brought his face close to Sena's, and then quickly returned to his seat again. He reached again for Sena's sandwich, but Sena, of course, prevented him from grabbing it before he could. Of course, he did so very casually. I too had a hard time at Baragaru's house because of all the unreasonable treatment I received. That's why I'm worried about your situation. I am a relative of a nobleman. I am not a legitimate son, but I'm sure that I have much more power than a commoner. Are you wary of me? But I certainly know who you are. so I can help you get home in many ways, and I can do a lot for you if something happens to you. All you have to do is take my hand. Then you are free." Kicha held out his hand with a really serious and sincere expression. The naturalness of it was like he was used to fooling people. Sena pretended to think for a moment, and then said, "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Of course, Sena didn't take his hand. "Your mouth doesn't match your actions." "Sena, aren't you having fun?" The sandwich battle continued to rage on under the surface. As expected, they didn't seem to touch the stew, but maybe it was because Sena had already tasted it once. If you're saying I'm too old to catch a magical cold, the reason is simple. It's because it's the second time. Sena took the last sandwich into his mouth, and the battle was won by Sena. Next came the battle for dessert. Second time? Hey, don't lie to me. It's true. The first time was when I was just a baby. Well, I wasn't sure if it was a magical cold or not, but I found a book in this library that has the same case as mine, so why don't you tell me what you really think? What do you mean? Don't you want to discuss the distribution of the large chimera? It was Kicha's turn to be silent in response to Sena's question. Incidentally, Sena also won the dessert game. Maybe you are trying to prolong the conversation? Is the cause the spirit thread attached to Kicha? Can you use the magic of disguise? He glanced at the ring. Can I use it? This artifact ring is something I paid for. I'm just going to use some of its features. I understand. So, I just have to make sure that he doesn't recognize the approach of the person monitoring Kicha. Thanks for answering so quickly. Please. No, I still have questions. What's in your luggage is a bit odd, don't you think? Oh, it's just that it seems to be from the Ascending Continent. It's a memento from my dead grandfather. Is your grandfather from beyond? Or is he being deported? He seemed quite interested in the matter. His eyes devoured it. I don't know. That's all I asked, but didn't you do some research on me? I know a lot more about you, though. That's a secret. Okay. Well, I'll leave you to it. Well, don't be in such a hurry. We'll talk about it later. Kicha tried his best to hold Sena back as he tried to stand up. I fought for my life, too, he said. But they give me a fraction of the money and that's it. If it's a distribution complaint, I can't do anything. I can invite you to Baragaru's house, though, can't I? I know it's too late for that kind of negotiation. I know it's impossible to negotiate now, but what is your share of the money? 30%. If it seems to be less. 30%. Really? I've had to nurse a magic cold, and I myself was attacked by a large chimera and left penniless except for some luggage. I bought some debt and equipment to offset. Or so. This information was a bit of a bait and switch. Yes, I knew it. Baragaru is deceiving me. He's deceiving you. He took you in without consulting any of the party members. He knew the value of the large chimera and wanted to get his share of it. No amount of care he gave you would ever make him lose his debt and his equipment. Glad to find an excuse to take advantage, Kicha began to speak gleefully. As I said before, I have a connection to the nobility. I can also help you get the proper compensation. Of course. That requires a price, doesn't it? Once you're associated with Baragaru, you're in trouble, you know? You'll be treated cheaply as an apprentice, and even if you make it on your own, you'll be treated unfairly in the allocations. I've been there, and I know many others who have been there. It actually costs a lot of money to get out of his party. So, you're getting paid out of the large chimera's share? That's where you're lucky. As long as you have the nobility working for you, it's a good amount of money, but it's better than having to keep paying them all the time, right? And the auction price for the large chimera is quite high. Isn't that a good enough return for you too? How much is that even at? There. That's the thing though. I have a better way. A loophole that's only possible because of me. Normally I would need about 80% of the proceeds, but if you transfer your rights to me, I'll give you 30%. You're right to be suspicious. There's a trick to it. That is, if you give the rights to the nobility, they will negotiate with Baragaru. Your contribution to the defeat of the large chimera would be more valuable with my testimony. If the members of your party accuse me of trying to keep you to myself, Baragaru's share will be ours. If we do well, we can even clear your debt. How's that sound? That makes sense, doesn't it? It's certainly a convincing theory. If only it could be done correctly. I'm guessing that Kicha will either get the rights to it or resell the rights to someone else, and tons of people will. It's about time. Understood. Let me think a little bit about that proposal. You'll miss the opportunity if you don't hurry with this kind of thing, right? I'm afraid you have a visitor, Kicha, so I'll take this. Sena stood up with the tray, avoiding Kicha's attempt to grab his arm. Go ahead. I'm done talking to him. Oh, sorry. A sturdy, muscular man emerged from the shadows of the plants. About 10 other people were already surrounding Kicha with big smiles on their faces. When he noticed that Kicha had a spirit thread attached to him, he tried to guess who it belonged to, but it didn't take him long to come to the conclusion that he was a victim of Kicha's fraud, based on his words and actions toward Sena. If he looked for the other party's behavior on the spirit thread, it was not difficult to understand that it was surveillance until they found Kicha at the museum and gathered their friends. There was no need to worry about what happened to Kicha, who had turned blue at once. From what he had heard from various people, including Kicha himself, it was just time for him to pay his tribute. It was only natural that they should have a discussion here. The rest should be discussed between the two parties and not something Sena should interfere with. With his back to Kicha, Sena returned the tray to the counter and left the museum, heading out into the city. I knew it. But my bad premonition seems to have come true. At the far end of the garden stood a terrace-like viewing platform. It was probably a place to enjoy an elegant cup of tea while looking at the panoramic view below. However, Sena, who could visualize magical elements, was not in the mood to enjoy the view. Is that a detection system? Yes. It was quite well concealed, and I was unaware of it until I let the magic sphere for exploration touch it. But even with the ability to visualize, I can't believe I could only see that much. Nayuta raised the magic sphere high into the sky and saw the wards that Sena and the others were looking at. The wards themselves, however, were not visible when they arrived on the plateau, and were only visible because the wards reacted to the spiritual threads, which were probably used for communication and transmission to the outside and wavered slightly like the surface of water. The most significant reaction that triggered the awareness of the wards was the large main road leading to the city. It seems to be reacting to the carriages and people coming and going. There were 3 places that could be seen from the terrace, and all of them were reacting to the situation. And besides that, when he observed the surroundings with this super telephoto image using a magic sphere, he found that it seemed to be reacting not only to the comings and goings of people, but also to a little flying demonic creature. It seems that there is a hemispherical boundary that covers the city. Perhaps it continues underground. Looking around, similar buildings were scattered at regular intervals around the boundaries of the wards, and a few soldiers could be seen there. It would be like a police box, so to speak. Of course, there was a large building along the street that resembled a triumphal arch, and soldiers could be seen there as well. No wonder this guy doesn't notice at night when there is no traffic. Even during the day, it seems impossible to see from Baragaru's house. To begin with, people are less active at night. And if it is this difficult to visualize, it is even more so. I'm sorry. I was really careless. No, I didn't think there was such a huge boundary either. If I hadn't actually touched it with a magic sphere, I would never have noticed it. But this makes it difficult to send the magic sphere out of the boundary. That means the city has a wall called a surveillance ward. So, is it possible to locate this place from the view from here? Yes, and with that river, the topography, and the museum building, it should be easy to locate. And then there is the matter of inaccessible data. With a precise image from high altitude, even ants could be seen at night by magnifying the image. The view from here was only a part of the picture, but the former palace was also quite distinctive. With this much information, it would be no problem for the Philosopher's Stone to locate the place. I'm just guessing, but I don't think it's as far away as I thought. It's quite difficult to transport a sick person, and considering the duration of Sena-san's magic flu, if it took too long, it would have run its course by the time they arrived. After he hid me in his home, was it safe to start disguising me, or was it 2 days at most for? If it was by carriage, it would be within a 60-kilometer radius. Maybe even shorter. 2 hours to the protected place and 7 hours from there to ZNV's location. It would be bad indeed if we stay in contact with the barrier for that long. Will you give me permission to analyze the wording so that I can go through it? I thought you already did that. Sorry. It was an analysis against Seina's will, and in some cases, an act that could be traced and put Seina in danger. But as the Philosopher's Stone, she was doing it as a matter of course as part of her role. This was the part where, as Seina said, the cooperation is not going well. Okay, I'll allow it. But please be careful. So, what's it like? It's pretty tough. The configuration changes every few seconds, and it won't even trigger if I don't touch it in the first place. The points and spirit threads that I have inadvertently touched will also be detected. However, I did move the point where I touched the warding to the top of the mountain where the Lord's house is located, so I guess that's not a problem. It would be the end if she put it up directly above Baragaru's house. There's always something up there, isn't there? So, since you touched it and it was detected, do you feel like you've been monitored in any way? Not as far as I can tell. Perhaps Seina is sensing something? I don't feel anything weird either. The more important question is, what was that surveillance for in the first place? If it is for surveillance, then who entered and exited, when and from where? I guess. Of course, demons would enter there, but seeing that they are also responding to communications and transmissions, I think the main purpose is to check on people. Who? Then we have to be able to identify the individual, don't we? That still means there is a high possibility that there is some kind of internal demonic pattern. But as I recall, I put protections on my points and spirit threads, didn't I? Yes, so that others can't take advantage of them. I don't think it is so easy to identify Seina-san, even in this ward. Wait a minute. Identified? I thought you said they took my pattern. If they are checking you in and out, that means you were caught in that ward when you were brought here, Seina. Wow! Then, my magical element pattern is also known. Seina pondered for a moment, then looked up with a quizzical expression. However, I was in the middle of a magic cold at the time, and my magic element organ was still forming. Is it the same in that in-progress state and after it is completed? But how can I know that now? Would you like to find out if the process is recorded in the magical organ? The pattern detected in the wards is in the early stages of the magic cold and after the formation of the polar crystals, so there might be a difference. Nayuta checked the area. There were many people, but their interest was focused on the garden and its flowers, and there were hardly any people near the terrace. No one paid any attention to Seina. Let's just give it a try. I'm interested too, you know. Excuse me. Nayuta must have started the analysis as the magical element began to be consumed at a significant rate. Seina was mindful of his breathing and replenished his magical element, but the consumption was much faster. As expected, the situation was not such that external magical elements needed to be diverted, so the combination of bioenhancement, magical element reinforcement, and enchantment reinforcement was applied. However, this method accelerated the conversion to internal magical elements and suppressed the absorption of external magical elements in the surrounding area. Otherwise, it could explosively absorb magical elements and create a vacuum of magical elements in the area. If it were to go wrong, the surrounding people would be in a state of magical asphyxiation, unable to absorb magical elements, and people with small magical element capacities might experience a state of magical element depletion. If that happened, all hell would break loose. After about 10 minutes, the consumption of magical elements abruptly stopped, and Seina also released the enchantment enhancement. Moreover, with this magic, there was a feeling of crystallization again. There was a record, but the amount was so huge that it took a long time to read it. So how did it go? As it turns out, your pattern of magical elements changed before and after. Apparently, the converted internal magical elements themselves also have ranks, just like magical crystals. It seems that the efficiency of conversion into events increases with the growth of the magical element organ. That means that the pattern registered as mine has already become different. Do you think you can compare the patterns before and after? I can't say for sure, but if we assume that the maximum length of the magic cold is 1 week, there is little difference in the patterns. It is still a dramatic change due to the long period of magical organ formation and polar crystallization. I mean, it's pretty hard to unprotect and identify. Without knowing my current magical patterns, Sena suddenly had a headache. Whoa, what's wrong? That means that if they know my current magical element pattern, it's not good. It would be just like registering Sena's biometrics and then having those biometrics change. In other words, Sena would be a different person. Since we know Sena's initial pattern, it is possible to disguise it. However, if you use strong magic, the original pattern will appear, so you need to be careful. What about the magical element filling so far? I just hope it won't be checked. Oh, the hidden things are getting more and more. But as long as Baragaru is involved, there must be some form of cover-up. I don't know how the magic crystals that are being filled every day are being used, but I think it is highly likely that the source of those who filled them is being hidden. Otherwise, it would be the same as announcing that a single person had filled such a large amount. That's wishful thinking too. At least someone of Baragaru's caliber should be aware of the magical element pattern. And he knows about Sena's magical organ. Do you mean that you've already checked it? If so, the disguise of the magical element pattern is a dead end. If that is the case, the biggest concern is the contact with that ward. If your true identity is revealed, you could make enemies of both the lord of this place and Baragaru. If you are not aware of this, you will be suspected in many ways, but it could also be taken to mean that Baragaru has the intention of escaping. I wonder how the access to the sky would look at night. That is a disgusting imagination. To the sky above could be considered space. Even though the point's travel speed is slow, you can still get to space in 4 hours. Of course, with the knowledge of the point and the spirit thread, but it could be taken as contact with space pirates. If someone believed Kicha, I could be a suspect, but it helps that I didn't raise the point directly above Baragaru's house. Had I done that, I would have been exposed in a single shot. If the coordinates of the grounding point were determined and the Baragaru residence was directly below it, there would be no excuse. We needed to see the whole area, including the other side of the mountain, so we decided that the best place to do that was near the top of the mountain, which was a good thing. I would have done it if it had been me. I still have to stay quiet and keep my head down here. I'm not sure how to get out of the wards in a natural way, but I guess the only way is to become a hunter-adventurer. I guess we'll have to keep CNV waiting. I'll have to apologize for that. Radio communication cannot be bypassed except for emergencies only, and if CNV had a master key like Kuriko's Mizuki. I think that communication is a surprisingly blind spot, but sure, it might be bad in this situation. Seriously. Demonstration is the only thing that's diligent. In the sky above, 5 weeknights could be seen in formation. They flew in this way regularly, only during the daytime when they could see well. It was just a threat to show that they were the ones in control of this place. Baragaru-san complained that they don't come at all when pirates attack, which is the most important time. No wonder they don't like people in the sky. To the people over here, we are all from the sky. The sky pirates attacked the night side of the planet. That's what the government of Iberium, the continent of the sky, the same name as this planet, was using as an excuse for the delay in intercepting sky pirate raids. Points in the sky at night, you know. It's certainly a nasty combination of conditions. If the lords find out about Sena, you have 2 choices: run away or be in the position of a child owner. If you are in the position of a child owner, it could be quite troublesome, depending on the person you are dealing with. If they know that you are from the sky and that you are here for a reason, it will be even more troublesome. Even if I escape, as long as I'm bound by the spell crest of the contract, my location will be identified immediately, won't it? If we make enemies of both the lords and Baragaru at the same time, then it doesn't matter where Sena is as long as you continue to pay your debt to Baragaru. But that would require doing something about these wards, which is the whole point, isn't it? Have you come up with anything? If it's around a highway with frequent traffic, it may be possible to analyze it because there are many situation samples. Conversely, it might be possible to pass points and spiritual threads through that place. Because of the frequent comings and goings, Points and spirit threads will not be detected unless they are activated. Of course, it will be detected during the movement of the point, but the change in composition may be gradual in that area. If you can read the pattern, move points before it changes and erase it before it changes. Since the point will be fixed where it moves. Are you going to keep moving it steadily? It's true that teleportation is only for a moment, so I think I can go. Of course, it's only a matter of being able to analyze it, but is it okay? It is more likely to be visible than to be analyzed in the middle of nowhere. I understand, but it's a nasty high-ranking opponent, so it's better to assume that he knows the weak points of his own warding. I ask you not to stir up a hornet's nest. It's just an insurance policy in case they find out, so there's no need to overdo it. Yes, handsome. For Nayuta, it was a chance to redeem herself, and she was happy to be of use to Sana. If you decide to do that, it's a garden after all. Let's have a little fun. The reason this place was treated as an annex to the museum was because the aristocrats in this mansion grew orchid-like flowers, which they brought in from outer space and crossbred with magic trees to create new varieties. Like orchids and roses on Earth, these were so diverse that it was hard to believe that they were the same flower, and crossbreeding them with the magic tree had further complicated their shapes. There were, of course, flowers of various colors, shapes, and patterns, but there were also those that bloomed underwater, those that would bear fruit, those that developed transparent petals with magical elements, those that glowed, and those that moved like living creatures. Above all, many of them were so beautiful and delicate that one felt like sighing. In this fantasy world, it would not have been surprising if fairies swarmed around the place. They were said to come at night when no one was around, but they fled as soon as they heard anyone, so the only people who could actually see them were those in the pavilion where the flowers were grown. You can see them. It's pretty. When the magical element was visualized, humanoid figures less than 10 centimeters in height, like a pale light, were swarming around the flowers. They look like butterflies. He could barely make out what looked like a face shape. The whole thing was blotchy and fuzzy. When people approached, they kept their distance, and when they passed by, they would repeatedly come close to the flowers again, but sometimes when children were present, they would gather there, and the children would scurry around, as if sensing something too. That's great. Especially when a couple with a baby approached, they gathered around the baby, or if it was a pregnant woman, around her belly, like giant dandelion fluff. If it were the ocean or something, people would say, "Oh my God, that's a huge fungus." Sana is the same kind of person who would think that. As expected, Nayuta looked aghast. But they're beautiful when they're flying around, but when they get together too much, you know. Butterflies dancing wildly in a flower garden were beautiful, but when they gathered in large groups like monarch butterflies and their weight sometimes breaks tree branches, it was kind of terrifying. Well, it's time to go home. The sun is still high enough, but the shadows are getting longer. If we avoid this morning's path on the way back, we won't have to say goodbye, will we? I've been keeping track on my end, and I can tell you. I've got an idea. You'll see. Sana was not good at remembering people's faces, but he was good at remembering directions. He followed the road they had come up in the opposite direction, and by the directions and the location of the buildings, he remembered the people Nana had taught him.